Hi, and welcome to OTH Sports View. I'm Chuck Pollock, Times Herald sports editor, and it's hard to believe, but we've pretty much burned through the entire Big 30 football season. Only 3 teams are left. The NFL is halfway through its slate, and we're on the brink of college basketball. In fact, the St. Bonaventure teams have already had their dress rehearsals, and hence our guests today. On my right, Jeff Madigan, who covers the Bona women for the Times Herald, and on my left, J.P. Butler, who covers the men. I will apologize ahead of time for wearing a hat. If I had a haircut like my 2 guests, I wouldn't be having a bad hair day. We're going to start just in deference to the fact that they had their exhibition first and they opened the season first with the women, and we'll talk to Jeff right after this. Jeff, I wrote a column last week about expectations as it relates to both Bona teams. And the men's team's expectations are predictable. The ones that you inherit are a lot different. There's been a coaching change at Bona, and I think there's a perception on the fans' part, well, the success that Jim Crowley had is just going to be replicated right along. Except, as you know, after the last trip to the NCAAs, Jim Crowley's last losing season was in that stretch. So are we being unrealistic?
Well, that would have been the 2012-2013 season you mentioned when they went 10-19. No, I don't think we're being unrealistic. I think expectations should be a little tempered this year. It would be nice if new coach Jesse Fleming could replicate the success that his predecessor had, coach who he worked under. I just don't know if it's going to happen. Stemming from Saturday's exhibition against Edinburgh, they did look good at times, but the first 20 minutes of that game were that was a little tough to watch at times. Only 11 points in 20 minutes. The defense played well. They only allowed 13, but they're going to need some offensive production to win games this year for sure.
The thing that sticks out, of course, is that there are 5 incoming freshmen. 2 of them stuck out to me, and I'll let you kind of guess who they were, but clearly Jesse's going to need contributions from his young people to make this team go because they don't have quite enough returning to carry this team.
I wrote a story about that. You must have read that. But yeah, you're absolutely right on that. 5 freshmen coming in to replace what Katie Healy brought every night, what Nyla Reeder brought every night, what Emily Michael brought every night. And although Emily didn't score a whole lot, she was the point guard of that whole offense. She made Jim Crowley's offense work the last 4 years, and especially last year when they did get to the NCAA tournament. So they're going to need to find a point guard, and they were hoping that Jaleisha Terry, the freshman from Flint, Michigan, can do that. Again, she's a freshman. She's going to make mistakes. She had a couple mistakes Saturday in the exhibition, but they definitely need that point guard. I don't think Mariah Ruff's not really a point guard. She's more of a shooting guard, so they need to find somebody to get that offense going. They tried with Imani Outlaw, but a couple of times she made mistakes in the backcourt, and when she got double-teamed in the backcourt, she tended to throw it away. She had a couple backcourt violations, but they definitely need to find a point guard, and that's what Fleming has to do before this Friday's game against Niagara.
It's interesting to me. Clearly, Mariah is a 2.
Right.
Imani's not a point. Jaleisha, she didn't do a lot statistically, but I liked the way she played. She looked confident with the ball. Right. She's got kind of an edge to her and plays aggressively. The other freshman who stood out to me was Sarah Hunt, and again, her numbers weren't terrific, except she did have 7 rebounds in a pretty brief appearance. But beyond that, she came off to me as a girl who's got kind of an edge to her, and you don't have enough of those types, especially if you put some numbers up to go with them.
Exactly. I don't want to correct you with Sarah Hart. So
Sarah Hart, yes.
No disrespect to the Hart family from Elgin, Michigan. But yeah, she's going to be more of a post player type person that they're going to desperately need with Katie's, now she's gone. She graduated from the program. They want Gabby Richmond to fill that role. They want Matea Britvar to fill that role. But obviously they need depth behind those positions. And I thought Sarah did a really good job the other day. Maybe the most impressive of the freshmen, Jaleisha, of course, as well. But yeah, they're going to need some production from their 3 and their 4 if they want to have a successful season. And right now, that's a question mark in my opinion.
Bona's season opens on Friday night at Niagara. Historically, we know that that's a program that has struggled. That might be as good a shot as any in the next week or 2 for them to get a win. And to start with a victory, I think, would do a lot for Jess, to say nothing of the team.
Absolutely. Well, and they have a game on Sunday as well against Colgate, another team that they've had success against recently. So, I mean, they're looking at 2 games in 3 days to start the season, before they have a week off before their next game. Yeah, this is a good opportunity for them. It is a road game. You want to play on the road, try to get the atmosphere together, the environment together. We ride a bus up there. And then they come back home, first game in the Riley Center for Jesse since 2011, I believe it was. I tried to get that the other day. I couldn't remember when it was. But it's a good opportunity for them to get their feet under them right away against 2 teams that haven't had a lot of success in the past. I think Niagara could be sneaky good this year. I don't know if they'd be an NCAA tournament team, but they definitely could be 500, which for them would be an improvement over the last couple seasons. You got Colgate, same thing. They've got a new coach as well. But that's another team that they were down the last couple years, and I don't know anything about Colgate just yet. I'm just starting to learn about Niagara myself. But it's a good opportunity for the Bonnies to get some early victories before they go up against, Austin P and Ryder and some of the teams that they're looking ahead. Get Canisius a week from Wednesday and those type things.
Totally unfair question to end this segment. What are reasonable expectations for fans as this season unfolds?
Reasonable? The Bills are in the Super Bowl. That's reason. Oh, that's not what you're asking.
Oh, well considered though.
That's very reasonable in my opinion. Some people don't share that opinion. I want to say 500 would be a reasonable season. I think the A10 this year is going to be very good from top to bottom. So I think the Bonnies have a good opportunity in non-conference play to try to get some wins under them. They could definitely hold some water in conference play. Canisius, Niagara, UB very good last year. They went to the tournament. Austin P, Ryder, Colgate, some of the teams that they're playing non-conference. If they can get out to a 7-3 start, something like that, that would be good for them heading into conference season. But like I said, the A10 is going to be very good this year. A lot of great teams at the top.
Next up, J.P. Butler, the man who covers the Bonaventure for the Times Herald. Unlike the women's team, the men's team's expectations are forged on merit this year for St. Bonaventure. We didn't find out a lot playing against the Division III school, Alfred, on Saturday, but we saw enough things, JP, to kind of tease us, including a couple of players that I think fans have reason to be excited about.
Right. Well, I think it's, they got what they want out of the exhibition game, and I've written about this. It's a really interesting dynamic when a team like Bona can lose the 2 guys that they lose, 2 of the better players in recent memory in Dion Wright and Marcus Posley, and the 36 points a game and the leadership that they brought to the table last year, and still be expected to be pretty good again this year. And any other year, if something like that happens, they're probably in for at least a little bit of a rebuilding year, a step back.
Right.
That might not be the case this year because of some of the new guys that you talked about. They've got 6 new players into the fold this year. It would have been a 7th had swingman Courtney Stocker been able to play this year for a 2nd straight season. He's going to miss the year with a foot injury. But they do have 6 others that they feel that they can basically plug in here and kind of continue to be as maybe as good, we'll see, certainly as competitive as they were last season when they had that really great season where they went 22-9 and maybe should have made the NCAA tournament. You talk about Matt Mobley, the transfer from Central Connecticut State, who sat last year. They certainly big things expected of him to come in and be able to replace Marcus Posley, at least from a kind of a production points standpoint, scoring standpoint. They've got, the transfer from Syracuse, Chino Oboko, who they're hoping can kind of give them a presence inside. They've got the forward who sat out last year from Liberty, David Ando, who's still making his way back from an injury right now, but who they hope can kind of offset the loss of Dion Wright a little bit. And when you put those guys together with who they have back, Jalen Adams, who, as we know, one of the best players in the A10. The steps that Idris Taki and Denzel Gregg and Nelson Caputo took last year. Top to bottom, when you put all of those pieces together, they still think they can be good again this year. The only difference is this group now has to actually go out and prove it, and we'll find that out starting this weekend.
It's interesting. The big break that the Bonnies got is they've lost 2 players. Obviously Stockard for the season. Nelson Caputo is going to be gone for the first 9 games because of academic ineligibility.
Right.
But amazingly enough, that's the position where the Bonnies could most afford to lose somebody And I'm thinking from your standpoint, when you look at the front court, it's a lot better, or looms a lot better than we had a right to maybe expect after last season.
Well, you're right, and especially after what happened in the summer where they lost their two young big men to transfer. And so there was a point there where the front court went back to being
Right.
pretty thin again, but looks decent. But starting in the back court, because I think that's going to be the key to their success again this year, just as it was last year when it was Adams and Posley who came together to form really the best backcourt in the league. I mean, that's what absolutely drove them in every game. When you have guards that can play that well, you can put yourself in a position to win most games. That's what they're banking on again this year with having Adams back, who's now a junior, so touted at this point. Last year, he averaged 18 a game. He led the league in three-point percentage. He was second in assists. He really just was the engine that made them go. He'll be back to do that again this year, and now they're hoping that Mobley can be that guy to make one of the better backcourts in the league again. And again, just with Taki and with Caputo when he gets back, the step that he might be able to take as a sophomore, they're hoping that the backcourt they'll be able to rely on that group again this year. But in the front court, it's kind of interesting because you think, okay, maybe it's not great that they lose these two, big men who'd shown some flashes, I think. But then you look at a guy, and to me, one of the guys that really stood out in that exhibition game on Saturday was Josh Ianni,
Right.
the freshman, who does not look like a freshman in any sense of the word. Just a big...
He's a man.
He's a man, just a big, muscular guy. And he's somebody that we'd heard a lot of good things about over the first month of practice, somebody who's just really aggressive, plays hard, better than they thought around the basket. And that's kind of what he brought on Saturday. He went 6 of 9 from the field, had 12 points, 7 rebounds, had another basket that was waved off due to a travel, and seems like he's somebody that can come in and basically be able to make them forget about the two guys they lost over the offseason, and maybe he's a guy that even becomes a starter sooner rather than later. The interesting thing with him, as Schmidt said afterwards, sometimes he's a little too,
Right.
out of control and just has to tone it down a little bit. But overall, for a guy that they didn't get until July 1st, basically, I think he's going to be a pretty good player for them in the long run.
It's interesting to me. We said going in, Bona's going to get nothing out of this playing a Division III school. But I think we did take a little bit from it. Obviously, Coach Schmidt was in a rage, figuratively, about the lack of defense. You give up 14 threes to a Division III school. He's not happy about that. And as big a game as Mobley had, clearly he did not play the D that Coach Schmidt wanted to see. But I will say, the minute he walked out on the court, I said to myself, this is an Atlantic 10 player. This guy can play.
Right. He can. I think that's what the expectation has been all along. He came from, Central Connecticut State, where he averaged 17 a game. He was one of the best scorers in that league, and they really thought in the year that he'd sat out that this is something that could translate to this level, that maybe this is a kid who should have been at this level all along. And so I think from, the scoring standpoint with him and Adams and what Taki will bring, and, Greg will probably be around 10 points, 12 points a game, they'll be fine scoring-wise. They may not be quite as potent as they were last year when they were really, if not the best offensive team in the league, right up there. And so that comes back to what you're talking about defensively. If they're not going to be quite as good offensively, that means they need to be a little bit better defensively and on the boards. They were about even on the boards last year. They don't want to be even. They feel like they need to be better, +3, +4 on the boards. They had a lot of games where they gave up a ton of points, but you didn't really care too much about that because they were scoring a lot of points. I brought up, the other day in a story, they gave up 85 points against Davidson in their A-10 opener, and it didn't matter because they scored 97. And you forgot about the fact that maybe they weren't that great defensively. And so that's why I think he was harping on it as much as he was on Saturday, because they're going to probably have to be a little bit better in that area if they're still going to be good again this year. And they gave up 14 three-pointers to Division III Alfred. I don't know if they gave up 14 three-pointers in
I
a
don't
game
think so.
last year.
I agree.
So that's certainly something that they'll have to be better at going forward.
Season opens on Saturday afternoon against St. Francis of Pennsylvania. And the thing that strikes me about the schedule, they're going to be home for a while. It seems as if the structure of the schedule is such, they can get off to a pretty good start and really kind of hit the season running.
Well, they can, and certainly with St. Francis, I mean, that's a bye game. That's one of the few teams that they'll have in the Riley Center that they won't be making the return trip to. And obviously the expectation there is a win. This is the 50th anniversary of the Riley Center. We've talked about they're 46-3 in their home/season openers, and so they've generally had no problem in these kinds of games, and I would expect probably the same thing on Saturday. And then they've got a bunch of home games again. The one thing that'll be interesting is in between that they've got maybe one of their hardest non-conference games with Florida,
Right.
down in Florida, and then they have their 3-game tournament in Austin, Texas, Thanksgiving week, where they play Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday in a row, and then they've got all these home games where they really have a chance to accumulate some wins the way they did last year going into non-conference or conference play. It'll be interesting to see how they stack up against a team like Florida this early, because even Bond at this point is still meshing all those guys together. And it'll be interesting to see how they come out of the round robin thing in Austin. If this is a thing where they can win all 3 games, or even 2 of the 3, I think that sets them up pretty well. But if they can get all 3 and then have a lot of home games remaining, again, this is a year where they can probably pad that win total and then see what they can do in conference play.
We'll be back next week to talk about the opening games for both Bonnet teams. Tune in next week for the next edition of OTH Sports View.